Okay, so welcome to the April 3rd meeting of the Zoning Subcommittee. This meeting is being recorded for future broadcast by Amherst Media. Are there any other announcements? Minutes from the last meeting. Comments? Objections? Additions? Motion?
I'll move to approve with thanks to the scribe.
Okay, I'll
Thank you.
second.
Oh, okay.
I don't need a second, you're on. Any further discussion? All in favor of the minutes? Okay, that's 3-0. So we are winding down our list of amendments, articles for the Springtown meeting. We have two left that have not yet had a public hearing, and I guess we'll take a look at those today and then wrap up any other business that we have.
Yeah, there are some very minor changes being proposed to process.
Okay. So the first one is fraternity residence dimensions. We've reviewed this before. We're just adding footnote A to a few of the dimensional requirements, dimensional regulations for the RF zone, which only exists in two small places in town. And the purpose of this is to hopefully allow some flexibility in potential private student housing development. Any comments? Go ahead, Bruce.
I just have a comment about the description, which I think is very good. But I just had one question at the bottom two paragraphs. The dimensional regulations of each area should be different in RF1, Olympia Drive, and RF2, Newman Center. Then it goes on to describe what the differences would be. I was just a little concerned that people might wonder, well, where in the article are RF1 and RF2? I wonder if there's some way of rephrasing that.
Those are earlier, position piece, and what we need to do is to describe those as future changes.
Okay.
For now, what we're doing is creating flexibility.
Well, I thought, though, that your descriptions there were accurate. I mean, couldn't those changes be made even with what we're proposing now?
They could. It's a bit of a stretch to go from, say 3 floors to 6, even under a special permit, although I suppose it could be done. The intent is not so much actually, if I were recommending something at this point, I wouldn't recommend making much of any changes in the Olympia Drive area, just these
Right.
superscripts. Looking at the notion of creating new dimensional regulations for that area that's on campus.
Well, that brings up the point, though, of I assumed that the language saying under A, shall consider the proposed modified dimensional requirement in the context of the patterns of the same dimensions established by existing buildings. I thought if you're talking about the university, that if there are 4-story buildings in the area, that would then be allowed. Is that correct?
It is.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say it could be done under just the footnotes. I think in terms of clarity, you probably would want even more guidance and some conversation with the university about what they were hoping would happen there. For
Right.
instance, and I don't know if this is what they want, but if you look on campus, there are the older residential areas up in Clark Hill and then in Northeast that have 5- and 6-story brick buildings
Sure.
that are residence halls that look just fine and are appropriate scale in that area, appropriate architecture. I'm not necessarily saying that should be the architecture, but that's part of the context that
Right.
footnote refers to.
So in other words, under the existing article, we're proposing if the university thought that was appropriate, this article would enable that sort of building to be built next to the Newman Center, we'll say.
Well, the 3 properties, the answer is yes. I just wanted to make a distinction that the 3 properties within the campus are all privately owned. They're not
Correct. Right, that's what I'm saying, yes.
university properties.
Yes.
Whoever proposed it
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure of that so that if somebody came forward with a plan, they wouldn't say, well, we have to wait for this number 2 to be passed 2 years from now, and, okay. Okay, 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 good.
Right, and the planning board always gets an opportunity to comment on special permit applications. Presumably, we would want to in this case.
Oh, yes, absolutely, sure.
And I just want to clarify that so in the RF, a fraternity residence use is allowed by site plan review. In this case, though, something that exceeds the dimensional requirements would
It would be a special permit by the body that's issuing the permit for the use.
okay, so it would be a planning board special permit then. Okay.
It would be both. It would be site plan review for the use and a special permit for the modification.
Right.
Dimensions.
Okay. Good. So that public hearing is coming up in 2 weeks, right? So we can wait for Connie to make a recommendation, I suppose.
Oh, sure.
And there's no rush. Any further comment on that article? Okay, let's move on to form-based design regulations for non-conforming structures in mixed-use centers. First of all, this is a section of the form-based design regulations that we've been working on the last couple of years that we decided to pull out and add to the existing Article 9 of the zoning bylaw. One of the more prescriptive form-based design regulations that we thought was important to promote for our mixed-use centers, even though the rest of the form-based design regulations is not quite ready for town meeting. First of all, I guess I want to note this is new language that we haven't seen before officially. It's easy for us to say, let's pull it out and throw it somewhere else. So I appreciate the staff working that out for us. So any comments on the language that has been proposed?
I would just point out that staff did make some minor alterations. And we read through what the consultants wrote to turn it into Amherstese. There was not that exception here. We did add the sort of geographic targeting to the mixed-use business center districts. Some of the references to the permit granting board or special permit granting authority, that kind of stuff. And some of the language to make the relationship between the instruction and the pictures clearer. And I couldn't tell you exactly what those changes were, but we tried to make that as plain and clear as possible. We did make one change to a graphic. The graphic under number 3 on the second page also had, for some reason, a small red box coming off of the left-hand side. And generally speaking, the presumption, although there's no key, here has been that if it was red, that meant don't do it, or that's a problem, whereas green is go ahead. In this case, there was no language associated with what put that little red box to indicate why they were doing it there, although it was clear that it was behind the front setback area, and so they were trying to say don't do it back there. As opposed to, on the next page, a circumstance where we have 2 instances of buildings that you really wouldn't do except be able to do under a special permit. Don't do that unless you get a special permit. So we had a red illustration under one and red illustrations on the other, no description on one, some description but by special permit under the other, and rather than create just chaos, sort of visual chaos, we took that little red box off of number 3 on the second page, just to make it clear that we're just giving a positive instruction here. If you're going to make an alteration, here's where it goes. And that also, I think, saved us the need to add a key to this, because it's otherwise we're all being directed by traffic lights here.
Bruce?
I find that particular drawing to be confusing.
One.
the number 3 for the side additions, because in the other drawings, the existing building is just white and black, and you see a faint outline of that in this one, and yet then there's more green and then the red behind it, and it just looks so different. Is that the old one?
That's the old one, the red.
Oh, okay.
What we're saying is we took that using red out of there.
Okay.
New versions, it's not there.
Okay. Never mind.
That's a perfectly good illustration of what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Go ahead, Connie.
I did go through this draft, and I don't know if you want to do it sort of section by section and collect, or just have me go through some are questions and some just whatever. Since this is the first time we've seen it in this format, I kind of rolled up my sleeves and.
Okay, well, it's short, so go ahead and just say whatever you
Okay,
want to say.
sure. And some of it might have been my own confusion, but under purpose, the purpose of this section is to establish form-based design regulations, and then for the location of new additions, couldn't it be regulations for new additions or enlargements? I'm not sure. I mean, maybe locations is in there because it's where it's positioned on the lot, but this is under purpose. Just, again, questions. Non-conforming uses and structures. And then in the third line, it says that were established prior to the effective date of these regulations. And does that mean Section 9, or does it mean the zoning bylaw? So I wasn't sure what the.
Oh, I see what you're saying. These regulations.
Yeah, these which regulations? It just and again, and do not conform to the provisions of these regulations. So.
I think in both cases, although it's a little, if you know anything about grandfathering, it's easy to confuse yourself. In this case, it is meant these regulations, because if these regulations are adopted, then anything that does not conform to them prior to that is not
All
conforming.
right. Again, I just try to make sure I understood. And then 9.31, 9.310, I didn't know if enlargement, repair, alterations, if all of them should be plural, because alterations is plural, but enlargement and repair are not. Again, this is just very picky zoning editing. Non-conforming structures permitted to be enlarged? Is that structures permitted? I just.
That sentence has got a problem.
It's just a grammatical. It's not parallel either with, without reading it all. Then when it goes on in the third line, provided, however, that any such enlargement. I think it's just the construction.
What we need is a may after the first non-conforming structures. Non-conforming structures may be permitted to be enlarged, provided, however, that such.
Okay, so anyway, I just,
If you look at it for too long, you don't see it anymore.
I guess I got, and 9.311, the last sentence in that paragraph on page 1, where it says, simultaneous rear additions may be allowed where the extension is not increasing the degree of existing nonconformity. And I just wasn't sure if the meaning was clear. And simultaneous rear additions.
What it's referring to is rear additions undertaken simultaneously with front additions.
I think just to be clear, and then.
I would just say what you just said.
Yeah. And then, does there need to be not increasing the degree of existing nonconformity? Are we clear what would be increasing nonconformity and what would not be?
You have to say it that way because you don't know what's nonconforming about the building or property.
And does this does this diagram explain what you're talking about, is that the illustration for the simultaneous front and back? Because I wasn't sure. Okay, just trying to be really clear before this goes out for, I think just on the second page, 2, I think it's just a typo. Buildings in the second line should be capitalized. Site additions for buildings located within, because every other word there is capitalized. Is that just a typo? Okay, yeah. For an existing building located at the front, should it be any existing building or an existing building? I'm sure. Okay. Well, any side, you have the same construction with any below.
The next sentence says any?
Yeah.
So just be consistent?
Yeah, the next clause, yeah. And then, shall also be located at or within the front setback area. Well, I have a note, but I don't even understand my own note, so forget that. And then just 9.312, all separate new buildings shall be placed within the front setback area. Are there any exceptions, or is the exception up to the permit granting authority? Or does it always have to be that way? Does it always have to be all the way within the front setback?
As proposed, it's always, if you want to.
I just want to be clear that, I want to make sure I'm understanding. And
I think what it's been doing to this point is talking about additions and enlargements of existing buildings, expansion of an existing building. They're doing now is saying, well, you may have separate buildings too. They're not connected to the existing building. Where do they go? And that, this first instruction, at least as written, just says it has to be up in the front setback.
all the way to the front setback line? So with no exception?
Front setback area, which is
That, a swath of, a defined area. Sure, and I only have one more, but go ahead.
Within the front setback area, should that be reworded so that it's either, so that it's allowed to be at the front setback?
At or within, yeah.
At or within?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It could be all the way back at
Right.
the 30-foot.
because the diagram might imply that it has to be all the way up to the line, so I just may be tweaking that language. And then, in the,
referring to is the area, the range.
Right.
So to say it's at the area, that's,
then maybe the diagram could show it split it part, someplace in the area, and,
within the front setback
Yeah.
area, within would include up to.
up to.
Okay, so the number 2 has the at or within construction.
Uh,
Yeah, that's.
Where does it,
Say it again?
Number 2 has the at or within construction, so,
oh, on page 2?
yeah.
Yeah, so that one.
Yeah.
Actually, because the first phrase refers to the front setback. So I think.
Still not finding it.
Be located at the front setback.
Oh.
Or
Because I have my old draft, because I marked it up.
within the front setback
Okay.
area.
All right.
Okay.
And I realized I'm working from what I brought home because I marked it up, and not what I had at home, and not what you handed out, because I can't mark it up that fast. But just on the last thing, number 2 on the third page, a special permit from the special permit granting authority. What if, could there ever be an instance where the permit could be a site plan review? In which case, it wouldn't, could it be, so I'm saying, if you were doing a site plan review permitting, could you combine the non-conforming review of these regulations into an SPR? And I'm not sure it says, and it doesn't actually say that here.
What this is doing is a semi-dangerous thing, because what it's doing is referring to another amendment that you are proposing before town meeting under the non-conforming structures amendment. Instead of referring to section 9.22, it might make more sense to refer to the applicable section of the bylaw, or whatever the phraseology is that's used in table 3.
Okay.
The applicable section of this bylaw.
Okay, because there's a new building's proposed to be located outside of the maximum front area. can only be permitted by special permit, but this might occur within the context of a site plan review. So I think, maybe, why don't you just say permit granting authority instead of special permit?
You're saying that, sorry.
Because you're naming the permit, but the reason that it's that, you're naming the permit, but then you're saying that the special permit granting authority is the one who's authorized to act under the applicable section of the bylaw, if we change
Right.
that language, which means the section that governs the use.
Okay, but the planning board might be doing the site plan review, and it may not, it has the power to be a special permit granting, but in that case, it's not granting a special permit, but it could review.
That's what
It
we're
is,
saying.
it is,
Enabling, if you want to do this, you want to create separate buildings, and you do not want to abide by.
then it would, so this would be an SPP if this was being considered as part of, a review by the plan. Okay, and so will the use chart correspond accordingly in some way, or?
Yeah, it's whatever the.
Okay,
it's
because
not-
we don't have a lot of SPP, and that's,
The permit, the special permit is only triggered by the fact that
it,
property is non-conforming and
and it's outside of this, and it,
whatever
right.
the uses are, the use permit is the use permit.
Okay, but I just want to be clear, because this instance of the separate buildings outside but appropriate to a particular site plan could come up, and it could be being reviewed by the planning board, and you wouldn't have to want them to have to go off to the ZBA for that.
That's why we would use the language under the special permit, from the special permit granting authority authorized to act under the applicable section of the bylaw, which is the phrase that we use all through the bylaw to mean whoever's issuing the permit for the use deals with this special permit that's
Okay.
getting added to it.
Because in other places, we often just say permit granting authority. We don't.
No, we try, well, we may in the bylaw now, but we always try and do away with that
Okay.
and have it say permit granting
But-
board, which is, if it's a site plan review, or special permit granting authority. So we have those two separate titles, depending on the permit that's being issued.
So then I'll just leave that. I don't know how I stand on it, but in some of these, rather than a special permit, I think some of these non-conforming site placement issues could be handled under an SPR. That's more of a content thing, and I'm done with my editorial. Yes.
I'm not going to answer it, but I'm going to add to the question, I guess. I understood that any change to a non-conforming building outside of the exemptions that we're promoting with our new regulation requires a special permit. So wouldn't all of these things require a special permit because
Yes.
they're all changes to non-conforming building?
Yes, and that's state law.
That's,
The way it's written now.
all right. Okay.
I apologize for it if it would do me any
No,
good.
no, I'm just trying to understand, because we're just getting this and we have to present it, and we have to understand it and translate it, and, okay,
Remember
I'm
this
done, and
section.
I'm probably done for the whole night now, because that was enough brain power for me to expend.
Remember, this whole section is getting added to the section that deals with
Right.
non-conforming uses.
Right.
And you're already proposing to make a bunch of changes to that.
And add this on in some form. Okay,
This is form-based design. You're,
Right.
in the mixed-use districts, you're adding this onto the end of that chapter. Bylaw. This is really, in some ways, this is the third mixed-use design regulation that you're attempting. You're doing the mixed-use buildings, you're doing the mixed-use center dimensions, and this one. That's the package. But this falls under the rubric of state law dealing with nonconformities, which requires that once you get to a certain point, you have to have a special permit.
thanks for clarifying that.
Done instead is say, where the use is a site plan review, the body issuing the special permit is the body issuing the site plan review. Whether it's the same body issuing two permits.
So that doesn't change at all. I mean,
So-
that's, right.
Good luck explaining that in the report.
Okay. Thanks for those comments. That helps. Anything else?
If I may, we have some changes, and it's in your packet, here, to discuss two existing amendments that have been recorded into the mill here. mixed-use center district dimensions. We had a conversation with the building commissioner, and we looked at the table 3 in terms of floors. Right now, in almost all of the residential districts, and in some cases in the office park district, the maximum number of floors is 2.5 floors. There's nothing anywhere in the bylaw, nor for that matter, anything clear in the building code that defines what a half a floor is. And the building commissioner is not comfortable, and we are not comfortable with adding half floors in critical districts until we have a handle on language to propose to amend. So that we know what we're talking about when we talk about that.
Okay, so this is a line, what's yellow is a line striking it out?
It's yellow and a line striking it
Like
out.
half pregnant.
The proposal is to take the half
But yours is better.
floor by right off, and for the moment, to lean on the fact that this category already has a superscript A, which allows someone to come in and say, I'd like a special permit to add a half a story, or whatever I'm going to describe it as, to the top of the building for the following good reasons, and please consider it, and then you deal with it as you would.
So it doesn't exist, and we thought it could, and now it's gone.
It exists in the table, but it doesn't exist anywhere else in the bylaw to explain what you do with it, or how you define it.
Well, it doesn't exist for BL Con,
No,
and
it
we
does
were
not, right.
toying with introducing that change, but
I can
Now
offer
we're
a
taking-
definition if it's not too
Recommending
late.
that the toy go back in the box for now.
but
A half a floor is half of a full floor. So in other words, that's why an attic space is a half floor, because you measure to the knee walls, which is about half.
That's one of the definitions.
Yeah.
that's one.
Run into about a dozen, we looked at different zoning
Yeah.
bylaws. Some of them have to do with what percentage of the floor that you're measuring is the full height under the building code, and then what percentage of that area represents of the floor below it. And
Right.
It gets very complicated. So
Besides, get
rather
two
than-
architects in a room, you're gonna get two divergent
Or
opinions.
you get 3 opinions.
Yes.
right?
rather than throw that at the building commissioner to try to make sense of between now and the fall, we would recommend just removing that for now, leaning on the
Just-
and then coming back.
Okay.
There isn't even a section under Article 6. Under Article 6, every single dimensional measure that's in Table 3 has its own section explaining what it is, not maximum floors. I don't know why. Maybe they thought that was so obvious that nobody would have any issues with it, but it's
I do think it's a, what's the term, common,
the problem is that there's several common ways of
Commonly
doing it.
like the real estate agents know what the cute 1.5 floor capes, and we all know what that is, right?
It's a common thing that happens. There's not a single common way of dealing with it or saying what it is. The other proposal, we
May
just
I just ask one
covered
quick
this
question?
this afternoon.
Excuse me?
Yes,
Sorry. So will we remove the half floor from this chart as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Everywhere where we're proposing a new half floor, we would propose that it go away.
Okay. Sorry.
On the third page of the version that's in front of you, under minimum and maximum height, we were looking at, actually this afternoon, we were looking at a building that was proposing dormers. And the person who was thinking about doing this asked, well, right now it says, if this goes through, am I measuring the height to the midpoint between the highest eaves on the building, which are the eaves of the dormers, or the eaves of the main roof?
Which Eve?
So we're proposing to add the phrase of the main body of the roof. So it's the eaves that are that are associated with the principal roof.
And will that always be clear? If there are two roofs of equal size, a wing and another part?
A wing and a ding.
Be the highest of those. That is to say, if you've got a wing that's lower down than the other one, it's always going to be.
Yeah, whichever is,
The higher main wing?
yeah. But now you're making me think about the dormers, because the question about the dormers, not knowing this project, would be less
Less high than the
less
particular-
favorable to the, assuming like this building, if you measured to the dormers, that would be less favorable than,
That's right. That's why we're trying to say that the
Yeah.
Remember, we don't want to get into measuring 16 different, if you have dormers of different heights and stuff, it gets very complicated. So anyway, those are the two changes proposed for this. Are there any questions about those?
Should you add another little drawing to that to show that, to make that clear? Or do you think that's not necessary?
This is sufficient. I don't think it will even come up, it's just.
I don't remember.
As you show on the first drawing? Okay.
Here's my amnesia. Did we have this public hearing already?
Yes.
So these would be, I move in terms of the article as amended on the, or something like, whatever.
No, because the warrant hasn't been signed yet.
Oh, okay,
We're hoping to get these changes in.
okay. So if the full
language
board
that will be on
wants this, okay, that's, okay, thank you.
Next Monday.
So is any objections to the proposed changes? Any comments? I think they seem like a good idea.
I have to say, I think removing the half floor is a good idea, because it might have confused people, or people might have thought, yes, yeah.
Right, so, and so we should take that under advisement and either create a definition of floor or get rid of the half in some way, either up or down for the other districts.
If I might, my only hesitancy in removing it is,
Yeah.
if we really think that it's important and a good thing to do, I'm not inclined to want to bring this back in 6 months when we find a good definition, just to go from 3 to 3.5. So it's sort of like, it's kind of a now or never for the time being. So if there's a compelling reason to go to 3.5, and we can articulate that, then I'd say, let's see if we can come up with a definition. If it's kind of neither here nor there,
We were under the opinion that it was neither here nor there because you can do it already under the superscript A. The only advantage here is that it would be by right, but if you're going to do it by right, then you have to be able to define it. And we don't have the ability to do that now. So
There was language in the form-based design regulations that talked about floors. It may not have been adequate, but it was in there. Since we're not bringing that forward now, then it sort of makes it more difficult to defend this.
I'm not sure there's a definition of floor either. So.
well, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, no,
to
plain old
start
floor.
With adding a definition.
Yeah, yeah.
Discussion of what floors are and what they mean and how you deal with, for instance, with basements too.
Right.
That are half in and half out of grade, and at what point does it become a full floor, and what point is it a half floor, and
Or
all
mezzanine.
that stuff. Right
A
now,
floor and a mezzanine is, yeah.
wanders around loose without a way of dealing with it. We think that we should be addressing it. The problem is we don't have time between now and town meeting to address it under this. Unless you want to hold a public hearing on the 24th or the 1st of May, and we don't recommend that. Headlong enough as it is.
So I think one of the main reasons to have a half floor is to signal that these buildings can be perhaps bigger than we're currently allowing. So that, to me, it was sort of an aesthetic reason, not necessarily a practical reason. And so I because it's difficult to defend without an actual definition, I don't think it's absolutely necessary, especially because there's a footnote A that you can, if you absolutely need to, argue for it. So I'm inclined to go with the recommendation.
I would too.
So we'll do that. And we'll report that to the board tonight. Okay, we have draft reports for the articles that we've already had hearings on. Have people had a chance to look at those, offer comments? Bruce, go ahead.
I have a comment about the mixed-use building standards and conditions on the back page, when it talks about more than 10 units would still require a special permit, and then it says, and a few residential units would be permitted to occupy approximately 25% of the ground floor area. I wonder if that can be rephrased, because in some cases, and I would think maybe even most cases, it might only be one unit, depending on the size of the building. I was surprised to see that, because I would think that would be a pretty big building to have more than one, since it's only 25% of the floor space. But am I wrong?
No, you're right, but it depends entirely on the size of the building. If the
Right.
building is, for instance, thinking about Earl Street in Northampton, across from the restaurant. What's the rest? The Cajun restaurant?
Sylvester's?
No.
Oh, Pearl Street, no.
One that had the logo of the cow truck. Anyway, that one. Someone came in and built what was essentially a whole block that looked like an old block.
Oh, right, near the train station, yeah.
The architecture of
Mhm.
the 19th century, and it was a pretty sizable building. It's not huge, but it's a pretty sizable building. And if you have that much area, you could build a building like that ran all the way along the frontage and then around the corner. And you could end up with 3 or 4 units. And rather than assert that we're only going to have one in the report, we don't want to mislead people. You might have a building that's big enough to have a few.
Sure. I wonder, though, if you could say one or more, depending on the size of the overall size of the building, or something of that
Yeah.
nature, because I think this
I agree that it does imply
like people
that.
to think every building is going to have 3 or 4 apartments on the ground floor, and I think, judging by the size of the lots, in most cases in Amherst, it would only be one, with small lots.
Where does it say one, or I'm just kind of,
Oh, under page 4,
Yeah.
right now it says, and a few residential units would be permitted to occupy approximately 25% of the ground floor area.
oh, a few. See, I actually disagree. I think that you might not need any ancillary space for elevator or whatever on the first floor, which allows anything between 25 and 40% could be, I mean, you could use 40% of the ground floor for residential units, and we don't really know how many. We're using a really different method, so I'm assuming a fairly large building, there could be multiple small, or,
Right.
I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, I think what Bruce is saying, that this language implies that any any mixed-use building, regardless of the size, might have a few. But he's saying, well, it might only have one. It might only be room for one,
might-
even if you take 40%.
Right, yeah,
And
So-
there
we
could
don't,
be some very small
right,
buildings,
so there's a real range.
It's a range, yeah.
But,
And some residential units would be permitted to occupy.
How about, and residential units?
yeah,
Yeah, that's
because
what
we can't,
Yeah.
and I actually had a lot of stuff on this report, and I thought this was a pretty important document
Okay.
for us, and maybe I'll let other people have a whack at it first, like Bruce did.
I don't know. To me, it still seems as if it should say one or more. I still think in many cases it would just be one. And to me, this does seem to be suggesting that every one might have up to 3, and I just don't see that would be the case. But I don't know.
I think the construction of just residential units
Are
doesn't
permitted.
put a number on it, so that's could be anything.
Well, that sort of implies the same thing, though, that
That it's
it's always going to be more than one, and, it just troubles me.
Residential unit, parentheses around the S.
No.
Well, and the truth is that it's going to be a range. It's not,
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's not one or the other. So
Right.
whatever language we use has to capture the fact that it is a potential range. It
Mhm.
could be as few as one, it could be none. In some
Mhm.
cases, people don't have to.
No, that's right.
They can choose not to. Or it could be, considerably more depending on how the building is configured and how
Right.
big it is. So, some or something like that.
I wonder if we should add a phrase that says, under Article blank, any mixed-use building containing more than 10 units above the ground floor or on the upper floors would still require a special permit, because you could have a building with 10 units that would include one or more on the ground floor, but that wouldn't require a special permit
On upper floors.
on upper floors.
That's good.
Okay, any other comments on this report? Connie? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, let
Bruce.
me get everyone else.
Well, I was just going to say, as an overall comment, I still would like to see some diagrams of the dimensions, not in this particular one, but, well, I could wait on that until we get to the mixed-use center dimensions.
Okay. Connie?
Okay, thanks. The first paragraph under purpose, I think this is a typo. Next to the last line, it says, including a residential uses. Is it? Okay, this is a typo. And then I noticed that in the report, it used the word viable a lot. And I thought if there was a way to kind of be more specific, plus it got a little redundant, and more viable overall. In a different paragraph, I was trying to get it more under background. It says there's general community agreement on the need to have viable mixed-use centers. It seemed really vague. Do we mean economically and socially viable, or what? I mean, one person's viable, there's another person, you know.
Vibrant.
Maybe vibrant, but I think it's hard to define, and I don't know fault of picking viable, but I think we each hold such a different idea. So then going back under purpose of the second paragraph, where you say, but it is in implementation of the same but it is an implementation of the same public purposes. Third sentence is in. Okay, fine. And then when you say Amherst master plan, do we want to say like parens, is that 2010, the specific master plan that we're talking about? I would then, wherever we say master plan, say the date, like the 2010 master plan, either in the title or in parens. And then I had an overall question. Is mixed use 2 words or is it hyphenated? Because I've seen it both ways.
We need Jonathan.
And once we decide,
Jonathan Chef's.
yeah, my tendency is
hyphenated,
to hyphenate.
I think it's hyphenated because
I did
think
too.
it's-
And I meant to look it up in some places, and I didn't. I'm sorry, but I would suggest going through with a search. Yeah.
Like multi-purpose would be hyphenated.
Is that one word? Multi-purpose might be one.
No, it's like multimodal.
In my dictionary next time.
Boy, I miss our Denise.
So let's see. Partway down in this second paragraph, it said, buildings and dimensions in existing districts. Do we mean existing zoning districts? Okay. Just to be. Then maybe this is just it doesn't really matter. Turn of phrase. Part of the intent of these changes is to modestly adjust, and I might say make modest adjustments to the character. To modestly adjust, I don't know. It just seemed a little bit. And I'm. Yeah, and then so that they can be more readily, permit the development of. I would just take out viable there and just say of village centers. That last line of the second paragraph, because we have viable in almost every paragraph. We don't need it there. A lot of hyphenating.
Say something to the effect of the kinds of centers the community has indicated it wants.
I think shorter is going to be better. I think we have a lot in here. Upper floor residential thresholds, the current regulations, the first line. When you say site plan review, I think it's the first time we've introduced that. You might want parens SPR. SPR approval process, possibly. What do I want to say this? I guess after the first paragraph, I had some notes about that a special permit's a discretionary permit process and does not provide property owners with the predictability necessary for the property owners and financing entities with the predictability necessary for the upfront costs for making investments in mixed-use projects or something, because we don't really explain why having it the way it is now has failed. And part of it is that the unsurety, hundreds of, the tens of thousands of dollars to bring something forward, not knowing if the board's going to allow it or not.
I'd be happy to entertain that if you want to email it to me.
I will. I'm sorry, I don't have it. It's hard to. I was going to send you these ahead. Depending on the size of the building, midway through the third paragraph, but depending on the size of the building, more units means fewer bedrooms, may mean fewer bedrooms. So I think we don't know. This has several effects depending on the size of. I just think wherever we can avoid predicting something that we have no ability to predict, we have more credibility. And similarly, further in that paragraph, a few very large upper floor apartments can house large families or large groups of unrelated persons. So I struck out with numerous bedrooms because we don't really know. Again,
I think that was the point, that the bedroom count does make a difference. A large apartment with one bedroom is, the rest of the space without other controls would get converted into sleeping space.
well, okay, well, I think maybe just looking at that whole last part of that paragraph, because we don't know if having less bedrooms or having smaller units or bigger units will actually lead to a particular population or another. I mean, one developer or property owner was here and made the argument that by having large units, in order to make it, in that instance, financially feasible, that there would be, more people, or it's just such. We don't really know how this is going to play out. Yeah, and wherever it is more of a tendency, I would take it out because I think it just is so speculative. Whereas on the other hand, smaller units with fewer bedrooms are more attractive to. I mean, that maybe that's can be small families, households of all kinds. Period. We don't need households of all kinds. You don't need to add then couples and singles.
What that was in there is partly because we were thinking about talking about the increasing demographic, that the most rapidly growing household size is one person.
Well, I think the more we can explain what we're doing with the proposed amendment and basic rationale for it, and less kind of going off like it might be this or it might be that. I feel on more solid ground. Let me just try. Last paragraph about live work. One of the purposes that mixed use buildings can serve is as live work spaces. You're thinking people would have like a shop downstairs and live upstairs? Because that's not really live work. Live work is what, or like art, live art, they're combined so that your residence is your workspace or your residence is your art space. I'm not sure we need that paragraph, actually, because I don't think that's what we're doing.
Well, actually, live workspace does not have to be all in the same space. It does have to be in the same building, but it does not have to be that the work, the lathe and the blowtorch are in the living room.
Well, maybe it's about different usages. The usage I'm familiar with is it's combined in one unit.
One of the things we wrestled with last year was the live-work unit as a particular use, and we decided that by changing the mixed-use building to not require multiple residences, that we could accommodate the live-work building within the mixed-use use. Previously, we had been interpreting mixed-use building as a building that had commercial space or retail on the ground floor and then more than one residential space upstairs. And so we created this new use, which was called live work, and we tried to promote that to the planning board, and we were trying to get it onto one of the town meeting warrants. That was actually an outgrowth of the form-based code and village center rezoning effort. But by rewriting the mixed-use building the way it's written here, it could conceivably accommodate a building that had one retail commercial space on the ground floor and one residential unit upstairs. And that would actually be a good thing, because there are buildings in town that actually have that type of arrangement. So,
Well,
that's-
without doing more research, but it just, that to me, that's not live work. That's the old, have the store down below and live above the store, but that's not, I mean, I don't know, Stephen seems to be nodding his head.
I tend to agree that I've always imagined live work as, or thought of live work as living in the space. So with a blowtorch and the,
Artist studios and things like that, I think that is the kind, but the use is broad enough that
Yeah.
it encompasses the old families, in the unit behind or above.
But that's not live work. That's a
But I-
good thing, but that's not, yeah.
I think in the form-based design regulation that was prepared by the consultant, for example, they used Amherst glass as an example of a mixed use rather than. So in other words, I see that as more of a mixed use.
So you don't want any reference to live work at all?
Because I don't think we're clear, and I don't think,
Yeah.
if that's what our goal is, I don't think this bylaw is about
Use
that.
phrase, if there's going to be contention about whether
Oh.
or not that's the appropriate use of the phrase, we can talk about the fact that mixed-use buildings can house both the workplace and the
And-
residence of people who are
Potentially, yes, okay, that's fine, but, yeah. And I love live work concept, but, and if we want to add it to our bylaw, then we should go for it sometime. I'm getting tired of my, the last paragraph, in order for the town to afford to undertake the necessary infrastructure. I understand that whole argument, but I'm not sure that that's even really persuasive, and maybe that would be talked about in an oral presentation, and I would maybe take that whole part out.
where was that?
It starts with,
Last
page
paragraph,
3 at the bottom, in order for the town to afford.
This is actually a report of what was said at the public hearing. That was said.
But you said, well, yes, but I don't think when we report the public hearing, and that was another thing, that we have to verbatim say what every single person said and summarize some.
We did summarize it.
But anyway,
Much shorter
I
than it
just
started out.
think some people are like, who cares about the grants? And it just, I mean, it's a point. If other people want it in, fine. I thought it was better left to the oral presentation.
Principle, and the reason we put it in, and the reason we said it at the public hearing, was that one of the principal pushes in the village centers has been, we're concerned about making zoning changes that might allow development. It's outcome we don't understand. So don't do that until you've done all of these other things, until you've fixed all the roads, fixed the intersections, put in streetscape, created infrastructure, taken advantage of all these other things, and tried to attract businesses that people want. And part of what was being responded to here was the reason why the sequence for that requires the zoning first, then the development, and the rest of it. And that includes the infrastructure, because without the zoning and some development proposals following on from that, there is no money to do the infrastructure.
And I understand, and other people might argue to keep it in, but I think when we're looking at land use changes, we're doing it, maybe this is like too much like the pure form, but we think it's a good land use change and not about we're trying to get grant money or not get grant money, because then people get off track, like, well, then we're doing this to get this money, and why is the state, and I just sometimes, I think it could be a diversion. I totally understand what you're saying, and I even agree with it. I just don't know if it is the best argument in this report, which, again, what are we doing and why are we doing it, and not using it to educate on every single tertiary, sort of side branch of the discussion.
Yeah,
Again, if people want it, great.
I understand what you're saying, and I sort of agree with you, but I think it's also important that that argument be made, and it's not necessarily going to be made in town meeting. I mean, it might, but to, we don't necessarily want to make room for it, because that takes away time from other things that we might want to talk about. It's important for that argument to be made by somebody. So if we know that someone's going to make that argument, then maybe we should take it out, or then we probably should take it out. But I can see what you're saying, that it is sort of a distraction. So I'm ambivalent about whether it should stay in or not.
Maybe we're misunderstanding part of this. That these are what the subcommittee recommended, and I think the planning board accepted, was that we're not going to come at the village centers as an entirety in terms of rezoning everything in site boundaries of districts and everything else. Instead, what we're going to do is focus on the pieces of it that are most critical to go forward, those being the mixed-use buildings, which in many cases are the only village center kind of building that can occur in some areas which are village centers, and the dimensions in the mixed-use districts where we want those changes to occur. We don't, for instance, want them in the office park or the neighborhood business district or those, but we do want them in these other areas. And that's part of the step forward. Along with that was we understood, and maybe I don't disagree with Connie, that it has the potential to be a distraction, but we thought that was part of the purpose, is that we're trying to get the village centers to become more viable. And these are smaller, babyier steps, to coin a phrase, to move in that direction. And part of that is the infrastructure. Part of that is the rest of this. This all leads in the same direction.
Well, maybe there's just a way to sort of talk about it and tighten it up a little, so less expansive. While making that point that this, whether there's grant money out there or not, we think it's a good thing to do. And in fact, because of the state's focus right now, this could attract funds. We don't know, and just kind of a little broad brush. And this is my last thing, and I'll be quiet on this one. In the last paragraph where you say there have only been 2 mixed-use buildings built, and then you give examples, and I thought of 2 others in the last 30 years.
We thought of some too.
There's the USDA down also in the Pomeroy Village area, and there's also the Mitchell Building behind the Sunoco. So I got 4, and there might be others.
Is that the one behind Mom's, basically, or no?
The next behind, like where Ren's,
Pioneer Valley
Sunoco.
Pizza? No, wait.
I think it's behind, like, Sunoco has a little driveway.
I'm
and
sure that one
Falcon.
counts because it never really succeeded as a mixed-use building. They intended it to be.
Well,
There's one on College Street that's up that we didn't count either. So
The one which is behind Mom's, right?
why don't you say only a handful have been built?
How about half a handful?
we sort of want to name them.
A handful and a half.
Don't name where they are. If someone wants to inquire, because it's just, in village centers, but I was like, because we just want to get it right. All right, thank you for bearing with me on that one.
What's the one downtown? Oh,
The Boltwood Place,
doing.
the white cube.
Okay, any other comments on that one or on any other one? Bruce?
About the mixed-use dimensions.
Okay.
I still would hope that we could get examples to show before and after. And I was wondering about if maybe a sample lot, say from North Amherst, and maybe one from downtown and one from another potential village center, maybe East Amherst or Atkins, and show what would be allowed with the current dimensions and what would be allowed with the changes. I think it would just be really, really helpful to see that in a visual form.
So, what changes are you imagining would be noticeable?
Well, I think well, for example, the issue of how many apartments could you have based on the square footage. I think that's a very good example.
Okay. So on the
you know, rather than, in some cases, rather than having 4 large bedrooms in one apartment, there could be 2 apartments or 3 apartments. I think if people could see that visually, it would have a better impact than trying to understand it by looking at the chart.
I'm not, you're talking about the dimensions?
Are we on the report or the?
Well, with the report, if there could be, it could be illustrations.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
But for
got it.
mixed-use center dimensions?
Yes.
So you're talking about basic minimum lot area and additional lot area per family, that
Right,
part?
right.
Okay.
We did include, and it's in this packet of maps, it's at the back, and by the way, we'll also include the maps with the Gray Street petition. But we included the maps of all of the different districts. And the last 2 illustrations are, again, using the Latrobe's site in North Amherst as the example. We illustrated what the change in setback would mean, and then we showed a aerial photograph of that property. Suppose we could take one of those, but all you have to say is if that entire building would be brought up to the back edges of the parking spaces along the edge of the road. That's what happens.
And for the other ones, for the first 3 lines in the table, the changes would affect the size of a lot that's required for a converted dwelling
Right.
in those. And a converted dwelling is a building that already exists. So I'm not really sure that that it has a big impact. I mean, what you would want, I guess, is to identify which buildings are candidates for conversion and say what could happen now, what could happen later.
Really, yeah, the changes that are happening, exception of setback, we're not making major changes in height, we're not making major changes in floors. You were proposing to go to 5, but we have 5-story buildings with that now already.
Are you looking for existing examples of these buildings?
No, I was, before and after.
What is the effect of these, what are the effects?
What will a graphic illustration of what the effect of these changes would be?
And I'm saying that there's they can only apply to existing buildings. So you're actually, it sounds, I think the effect of your suggestion is to actually identify the buildings in BL or COM that might be conversions, and what would be the effect of these changes on those particular buildings.
You know,
Right.
Or new subdivided dwellings, not that we have ever built one in Amherst.
Yeah, well, okay.
If you wanted an example of an existing building that is within the parameters of the front setback requirement, you could look at the building that's next to R&P Liquors in South Amherst at the intersection of Pomeroy and 116, and that's about 17 feet from the front property line. So it's within this 10 to 20 foot, 10 minimum, 20 foot maximum setback requirement, and then all the parking is at the rear. So we could give you a plan view of that and show, where the 10 foot and 20 foot line would be. Would that be helpful?
well, I think the other drawings probably do illustrate that pretty well. Well, I guess maybe they're not needed then. I just thought that maybe I misunderstood.
In North Amherst, for instance, one of the buildings that already meets this requirement in terms of setback is the old post office building, it's the Japanese restaurant. It's right on the sidewalk, and so that there's a pedestrian space created by the location of the building. Most of the other buildings of any size that are older are either former residential buildings or institutional buildings, like the library or the school or church or something like that. Or they're buildings like Watroba's, which were built for highway use. One of the points, and I wanted to emphasize this and get your response to it. same report.
Excuse me, mixed-use center dimensions report? Okay, page 2.
Page 2, top. We're making the argument here that these two districts are really our highway strip zoning. Certainly the commercial district is. And that's not appropriate anymore.
I had a lot of edits, and I wanted to, in general, suggest that I just hand this over to you because I'm not going to go through them, but where there was some content. I think that we have, I modified this, BL and COM districts have resulted in strip commercial zoning. This is not highway. This is not actually sprawl in the classic sense when we talk about sprawl. It's not attractive, and it's not in keeping with the master plan and our current concept for village center development. But I think that is a little too much. And I'm trying to, there were a few, just anything that we might actually want to talk about, and that was one of them. But I think if everyone's comfortable with that, and you don't have to take the staff doesn't have to take all these changes, but just in the spirit that they're offered. I'm trying to also maybe shorten. 8-page report is pretty long, even though this is a really important, I think this is for me, this is our most important piece of work that we're bringing forward, and it is important to explain it, but if there's a way to, people will get past reading past page 2, would be good.
Well, that's why on the first page we referred to that unified chart.
Well, no, I understand. There's just, I guess the only other thing is last page about the current zoning for mixed-use centers has not worked because there aren't enough people living near those. I'm not sure that we really, I know that the economic viability of mixed uses is enhanced by having a larger residential population near them, but I just thought to say that that's why they failed maybe just to soften it a little. I'm just going to turn this over to you because I can't bear to go through another one and
Thank you very much. I really appreciate
take it or tear it up.
I just noted that if you do accept the deletion of the half floor, there are a couple of paragraphs that should probably be
Noticed that
deleted.
too.
Saw those, yeah, still in there.
Yes, we will trust staff to make the appropriate changes.
And if I could add a positive comment, I was very appreciative of getting a chance to look at these beforehand, and I know it takes a lot of work to crank them out and get them to us so that we have input before they get sent out. So extremely grateful that the staff was able to get them to us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I agree.
Okay, any other comments on any of the reports?
Can we talk about the residential, the RF fraternity one a little bit?
Sure, yep. What would you like to say?
I think, I have to find it. Did we get the whole thing, or I know we got the,
Well, on your table is
okay.
what we've gotten before, which is the amendment, a slightly new version of the summary of the argument, a map of the private properties, an excerpt from the UMass master plan.
Right. I'm just trying to, if I didn't print it out or why, what I only have is some thoughts about this sheet, so I'm probably just by now totally confused myself. There it is. I think I looked at it electronically yeah, because really, in this case, the report is
It's not a report.
okay.
yet.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, we don't have that report. Okay. So I had a couple issues with this handout and would suggest that we modify it and I don't know, maybe this is something else we could, that we have a regular report to town meeting about our thinking for the fraternities on, and this is kind of it's sort of a polemic of, and it's a good first draft, but I think it actually can create more problems than it solves. I think there's some red flags in here that,
it served the purpose that we usually try to serve prior to the board reaching a decision about what it wants to do, which is to push at all of frame the question, push at all of the edges and see
Yeah.
what people.
so maybe to subsume some of this into a short narrative in the report of what would this change do to the zoning bylaw and the rules, and why are we doing it?
Are you suggesting that this should not be handed out?
Yeah, I didn't like this, or there were a bunch of things in this that I didn't like, and we could go into it. If you really like this format or what it said, I just found it problematic.
Again, I don't. I think you're right that maybe the arguments that it is making can be incorporated into the planning board report.
For example, how likely is it that UMass, the biggest generator of Amherst student housing needs, will build significant numbers of student beds? It's like, I don't know that we need that in that way in order to say why we think this is a good idea. And then it says, unless the state laws obstructing public-private partnerships or housing on Commonwealth are lifted, slim to none. It's that kind of, like, it's just the kind of editorializing on a topic that I think sets off a kind of firestorm of discussion that is, we may need to discuss that, but I just think we're sort of inflaming some issues with this that, sort of I want to get into it. Like inventive local developers, I just, with that. The latter may represent the biggest existing opportunity to generate meaningful amounts of student housing without disturbing a neighborhood. I just think that's problematic to say in that way. We don't know. This is one opportunity. We're just bringing up the disturbing neighborhoods. I don't know. Some of it's fine, but I just thought some of these were sort of little red flag things in there that we could.
Okay. Yeah, I think your point is well taken.
It's not meant at this point to be the reason argument. It's the overall pieces lying around.
Yeah. So, okay, so recast that discussion as the planning board report, assuming the planning board recommends the article to begin with, rather than hand it out in this raw form. Makes sense to me.
Say it again, Rob.
So recasting the discussion that is presented here as part of the planning board's report, assuming the planning board recommends the article, rather than handing it out in this raw form. The maps are useful. The UMass master plan is useful, but this is raw and it's first draft, and yeah, it's not appropriate. Okay.
Are there questions about any of the other reports?
Yep, I think
I would note that on your table is email from W.B. Coles making a last-minute request for changing open space community developments to a by-right development method. Now, pass that on to you.
So,
comments. Anyone want to take this up?
not ready for spring 2013.
So the underlying point, I think, is that to me is that she's trying to push the idea of transfer of development rights in different ways. I think, and I think that's what the point is. And if a transfer of development rights bylaw is not workable for Amherst, then maybe it can be approached in a different way. I think that's what she's trying to say here. And one of the ways that she's suggesting is more of a by right approach to a conservation oriented development. So I think it's worth considering, but
Yeah.
certainly not between now and
Yeah,
a month from now.
I lean favorably towards the concept, but I don't think the time is ripe to add another by right proposal to spring.
Okay, so we will report on that as well to the planning board. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about outreach and also Connie's suggestion that we plan for our presentations in groups somehow. Again, the official outreach opportunities include the TMCC events of the warrant review, which I will do unless someone else wants to do it.
Is that the league meeting?
The league and TMCC.
I'm hoping to be there.
Okay, so maybe you can.
Fine to have
help,
you
yeah.
do it, but I have it in my calendar.
There's the bus tour. If anyone wants to go, there are some of our articles that you will be able to point to. And definitely we should make an effort to attend as many of the precinct meetings as we can. And it's difficult for one person to do it, so if we can divide it up ahead of time, that would be nice.
Do we have the specific dates?
we don't
That's
have
the problem. I mean,
dates as
wanna
far as
do-
I know. Yeah.
I'm happy to do what I can do. I have a comment about the bus tour.
Yep.
I mean, I think the bus tour is a great idea. I went one time and I was very kind of chagrined because people who were leading it were giving very personal opinions about some of the articles, and I think it's important to have somebody who knows these proposals from the planning board perspective to be there to kind of make sure that misinformation is not given out, as it was on the one I went on.
Mhm.
But I'm not willing to go through that again.
I have the exact same opinion about the bus tour. It's not working in its present form. So, yeah, it's been hijacked. And I don't want to go. I don't want to do it either. But
Yeah,
if someone can do it, that would be nice.
But who wants to take one for the team?
Frankly, think that that's a real concern. I think it is. It's not one we can raise. It becomes much better for the board that should be said to the TMCC as an organizing body that its intent is much along the lines. I mean, it's doing this in concert with the League of Women Voters, is to present a neutral setting and information for
Yeah.
meeting members, and instead it's being used as a lobbying.
Yeah. I gave my feedback to a town meeting coordinating committee member who is also on the tour. So I did actually give the feedback. I don't know, maybe it's been corrected now.
I have too. So I don't know whether it has or not.
Competing bus tour.
We could do that. Yeah.
So ours would be a bicycle tour.
Ours, we could do that. I've thought about
Like-
that.
In
Yeah.
Austin, they have these pedal bars. What do they call it? And there's like 6 seats, 3 and 3, and then a driver, and you're pedaling and drinking beer at the same time, moving the van forward with pedal power.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Chris?
I just wanted to ask about the logistics of the planning board reports on these two public hearings that haven't occurred yet. The hearings will occur on the 17th of April, and then you have a meeting on May 1st, and town meeting starts on May 6th.
Right. We'll have to do a different process of review and editing than we've done with these. With these, we had ample time for us to draft them and for you to read them and look at them in a public meeting, and the planning board itself is going to be looking at these tonight as well. I think you might, for the final two, end up delegating that authority to the chair of the board, the chair of the subcommittee, or something to that effect. And we can always disseminate them by email.
And we can send them back.
Individual responses, but we cannot have anybody doing it.
Right.
ideally, those will be done in time for the mailing instead of, yeah, okay, yeah.
As much as feasible, if we can get them in our inbox and want to take a shot at some suggestions and send them back to you, and then, you know, I'm either you or you and the chair can decide what stays in it.
Okay, do people have an idea now of which article they might want to work on or present at town meeting, so we can start possibly scheduling working meetings if we want to?
I'm interested in the mixed-use buildings. That we just were talking about. I know there's two related, and maybe they should be presented by, and I'm happy to work on it, and if I'm seen as a liability on any of these, I can help work on it, and I don't need to present it.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested in those two as well, so maybe we can work on it together.
Sure.
Are other members of the committee willing to take on some of the other articles so that we don't have to think about them? I guess we can also ask the planning board tonight, hopefully.
I'm sorry, so this will be obviously to present, but also the working group.
Well, we were thinking that rather than one person taking it home and the first time that any other member of the planning board hears the presentation is on the floor of town meeting, to work it out together, you know, just get together for an hour or something and talk about these are the issues that need to be raised. This is the argument that should be made. These are the visuals that we want to do, that kind of thing.
I see.
I'm happy to help with anybody who needs help with theirs. I can't present one because I won't be here for town meeting, but.
Oh, you won't be here for town meeting?
No,
Okay.
but
You're not
I'm
going to be here for
happy to.
town meeting?
No, but I'm happy to help anybody with their presentation.
Where are you going?
I'll be on vacation in Italy.
I'll be with Bruce.
Do with what?
With Bruce.
Oh, you'll be with Bruce? Well.
Okay,
Carrying
so
his
if Connie and I can agree on a time to meet, can we ask staff to post a meeting or something? Is that? Sure. Okay.
And I believe we can email each other just on a logistics of when, you know, here's some dates and times.
Right,
And then,
yeah.
then it can be, we can talk to that degree. It's just
Okay.
meeting time stuff. Is that correct? In terms of open meeting law? Yeah.
You can discuss administrative things, you can't.
Right. We won't talk about what's going to go in the thing, but just, here's some dates. Great.
I'm sorry.
We have other ones that are ready here, the converted dwellings, the Main and Gray Street.
Mhm.
These are the non-conforming uses and structures, maybe we
I'll
have
do
to present that.
Yeah,
So I'll do converted dwellings. And I'm sorry, what were the other ones? Main and Gray, that's not really ours though, right?
we have to make well, we don't have to make a report, but it's common that we
Speak
do.
to it if you want.
Well,
Yeah, somebody has to report the planning board's
I mean, I can do that also.
deliberations. And
Do you want help?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they, yeah, I mean, sure, I'd love help in Tuscany, or where are we going to meet?
Oh, if you need
Stephen's
any
got
help on
two,
it.
that's four, and maybe other planning board members would take.
Yeah.
Okay,
But also, the fraternity one, I'd be happy to do that one.
okay. So, Well-
That doesn't put you in any conflict or anything.
Oh, good point.
I was
no,
thinking
they're
you'd be good for
private,
that, but it
they're
might.
was,
private, it's not university property, so.
No, but they're in a butter.
Oh.
To whom the bells toll.
to the university's property. And you're on, yeah, okay.
Or is there a perceptual issue of having a UMass
But this is
employee present? Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is legislative, not deliberative.
It's not
So,
a specific project.
yeah, and also it's,
I don't have I don't have a problem, but I think it's worth just tossing it out there.
Worst, it would be an appearance issue.
yeah.
Not a real conflict, but an appearance of conflict. Let me think about that.
Yeah. I can resign from the university.
No, just don't.
It's the university.
Whoops. Is this my,
Impoverish
that mic's on?
Okay, so we have, I feel like we've sort of wrapped up our business for this spring, but there's still another meeting before another potential meeting before the actual hearings on the last two articles. So we ought to decide whether we want to meet again. We could meet again and start working on the fall items. Or
I think it might be worth, well, we need to decide whether it's worth to meet to discuss, because as we've discovered with, a couple of things change a little bit, and sometimes the board needs a recommendation from the subcommittee on a shift, although at that point it's going to be, if anything comes up, it would be a motion from the floor to amend rather than incorporating the language. But also to discuss what's come up in the public discussions to date. The TMCC warrant review is coming up.
the warrant review will be after the next.
Will any of the precinct?
But you're suggesting that we should meet because we just don't know what might be necessary to do next time.
And if nothing comes up, you can always cancel.
Are you talking about meeting on the 17th?
Yes.
Well, I don't remember that you voted on these two articles that you discussed tonight, so
We
you
could.
might want to vote on the 17th,
Right.
right?
That's
So
true,
you can
yeah.
make a recommendation to the planning board?
Okay.
Just a time, do we want to meet later, thinking we might only need an hour, or do we want to meet at our regular time and I'll go out for pizza if we wrap up in 20 minutes? Or
Yeah.
think, or, just have,
Sells a goal.
I'm inclined to meet at 5, but that does make sense to me later.
I'm habituated to it. So.
Okay. So
That's what
no
people are
objections
used to.
yeah.
Sure. That sounds fine.
So we'll meet on the 17th and possibly not again after that. But we'll see. Is there any other business that anyone wants to take up? We can take a few minutes of
Good.
comments if you want to hear comments.
Just more thinking ahead to what we might be working on in the future and where we might be going in the fall. I think if we could start to shape how we want to have a community discussion or set of discussions about housing and student housing and other housing, it comes up and people have said they would like to be part of a process to talk about sites. I don't want to call it a charrette. I want it to be something like an open forum, maybe not exactly like a charrette, but to have public participation around some discussions about that in a way that we can facilitate and maybe look at maps and do that. I don't have a whole blueprint. And I know we have some master plan implementation money left, and we may have 3 or 4 good uses for that, but it seems like that could be something we might want to consider, using some of that money to help with facilitating or preparation for holding some of those meetings.
So you're talking about a public meeting outside of a planning board meeting or a zoning subcommittee meeting?
There is
Yeah.
it's on paper, the town manager and chancellor have agreed to, in general terms, to embark on exactly that discussion about joint issues, including housing. And so there may be some opportunity for melding things
Okay.
here. The university was planning on funding much of that study, so.
I guess I missed that, yeah.
Everybody needs to know what it is that they're talking about doing, and then see if there's any
Mhm.
overlap and where their money and that money.
Yeah, and I guess my thrust and my thinking was specifically to encourage a broad public participation, at least at the early stages of this. So it may be different or not than what they're thinking of, I don't know.
So do you want to make a list of recommendations to this possible committee process, whatever, saying, who should be involved or where it should take place or what places?
I haven't, don't,
I mean, is
I
it,
haven't gotten, I didn't,
I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
I'm not saying, do you want to do that?
Oh.
Do you think that it's appropriate for the planning board or the zoning subcommittee to draft a memo
I think we
to?
can spearhead an initiative, and then other people may have other opinions, and there may be some of our money and some other money, but I think we said this is important, and I think it's hard for us to really get out there in the community unless we make a kind of special effort, and this seems to be the issue that has the community's attention and interest, and our interest and attention.
I think it's very important that the town sort of put its hands on this as early as possible, that the planning board in particular is uniquely both qualified and authorized to look at those issues.
You know, I don't know, maybe we want to discuss, well, what other master plan implementation things do we want to look at? I mean, I know Mr. Tucker had some ideas on some design materials, and there may be other things. So I just think, you know, having the money, not that it's burning a hole in our pocket, but it's there to help us move forward with, you know, the community's vision in the master plan. And there's different things have popped up where that's appropriate. Get that money out there. I mean, we have resources. We don't always have resources.
Okay, anything else? Does anyone want to make a comment before we wrap up? Ms. Keller?
Janet Keller. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. Precinct 1, North Amherst. I would like to, if I may, cast our comments in a somewhat different light than I see them reflected in the notes. That's pretty important to me.
In the planning board report you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. As you know, and you commented on it in that report, Maurianne Adams in particular made the point about the different types of areas that you're covering in this rezoning package, and distinguishing North Amherst from, say, College Street or some of the other areas. And I'm holding this, you know, I've made this point a million times, so you got this commercial thing stuck in the middle of rural outlying, rural low density, RN. To say it doesn't have an impact on all those things, I don't think you're saying that, but you're saying it has to stay together in the package. And the point we were trying to make was that puts us in a terrible, terrible position. And the point I'm trying to make is that we want to support appropriate density in appropriate locations. That is smart growth. So adding a lot of density downtown makes sense. We've said again and again, we support it in appropriate areas like downtown, College Street, Mass Ave, University, and Olympia Drives, and the area near the Newman Center, perhaps. But we have to have zoning bylaws we can support, not ones that we think will eviscerate our neighborhood. And there are drastically different places that will be affected by this this rezoning package. So we don't want to be put in a place of voting against and helping to defeat zoning laws. We want to be in support of zoning bylaws that we think will help our community. So I really did want to clarify that request that we made, and I'm going to make it again, find a way to not throw North Amherst under the bus in order to get these other good things done, please. That's what we're asking you for.
Are you done? Can I respond?
Sure.
Okay. So do I understand you to be suggesting, maybe you haven't formed this, but maybe you're moving in that direction, is that you want some sort of softer and more constricted COM zoning for North Amherst? So not the existing COM zoning, not village center zoning, but some other thing that is COM-like, but in a smaller area. Is that so? A new zone.
Yeah, and so let me clarify. So thanks. And let me just say back what you asked. Am I asking for softer? Jim offered less dense. Say again, cutting back the area. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. So when I've heard you speak several times, it seems that there are 2 points you're making. One is that the red splotch there is too big. It goes too close to the river and various other things.
Yep.
So it should be, if it's red, it's got to be smaller. The other thing is that you're saying that the potential density that we've talked about with village center zoning and even with COM zoning is not the density that you want for that area. So you're just looking for a softer COM.
Yes. Yes.
So a zone that doesn't exist now, a set of regulations that doesn't exist now, but something new to go there.
Right. And I was kind of sidetracked, as you know, by being on the safe and healthy neighborhoods. I wasn't able to give you all the attention I like to give you. And that I know you so enjoy. So
That's true. You do.
So I recall seeing when I was thumbing through my maps that there was a map that I know nothing about because I wasn't able to attend the meeting that did show some BVC around the edges there. So I'm hesitant to answer your question because I don't haven't had the opportunity to map this all out. I've been scurrying to try to get this thing to understand what this package is. It's a very, very complex package. And there is just one other point I want to make, is that in your materials, you talk about it merely, it's mixed use and it merely increases the density. And I just want to take one little piece, and I have not synthesized this. I'm still going through, and what does this mean, and how does this add up, and that sort of thing. But just this one piece, which is just the mixed-use buildings. Formerly, by right, someone who owned something in COM could propose up to 3 residential units, or no?
The current regulations, which have been in place for a long time,
The current regs, yeah.
have both an area threshold, that is to say, if you get
And a unit threshold, and it's 3.
the unit is 6. The current regulation is 6.
Okay, I stand corrected on that. And do I now understand this part correctly? That it would now be 11, 1 on the first floor and 10 on the upper floors.
10 on the upper floors.
10 on the upper floors plus the one that previously you couldn't do on the first floor.
The threshold for changing from a site plan review to a special permit would now be 10 upper floor units. And the mixed-use building regulations are being changed such that dwelling units are possible on the first floor within a certain percentage of the total area of that floor and only on the rear or away from public areas to prevent conflicts between the residential units and the business units. For a small building, you might end up with just 1 or none on the ground floor. For larger buildings, you might end up with more. Probably not many, but more, because you still have to stay within the percentage of the ground floor. There isn't a single unit number associated with the first floor. It's a percentage of the total floor area. And again, what we're doing is we're just moving the threshold a little bit. It's still a special permit if you get over 10 units on the upper floors. And that's the only change, really. It's clear.
3 floors instead of, or
floor number there, and it says 3, and it's not changing.
Right, and 40 feet is 4 stories.
40 feet is to allow room for utilities and so forth.
It doesn't say that. It says.
Doesn't matter what it says. It says 40 feet is, 40 foot is the height to the highest point of whatever the roof is as adjusted in the amendment. The number of floors on the street side, based on the average grade, is 3, and it's not changing. Yes, it does.
So it does.
It says it in the yeah. You can do that now. You can do that now.
40 feet high is 4 stories.
But you're not allowed, the building commissioner won't allow
We're using
a plan.
stories differently.
I don't think so. Stories in the floors.
40 feet.
It also says 3 stories.
So perhaps I could just sign off to say the message I want to leave you with is softer, pull it in, and please don't put us in the position of not being able to vote for something that we think is really good. Because we feel like our neighborhood would be really hurt by the package. That's really the message I want to leave.
Thank you for that. I would like to respond to the framework here. The only way to do that is either to withdraw all of this and redo it, because all of the stuff having to do with the commercial district, and redo it, or, well, period. You'd have to withdraw it because you cannot create, state law dictates that you cannot create a set of regulations in one district that is named COM that's different from another district that's named COM. The commercial district regulations have to be consistent everywhere the commercial district exists. So in order to do what you're talking about, you have to create a different district. At the very beginning of the discussions, following last fall, the subcommittee looked for a while at the question of, do we look at regulations or do we look at boundaries? And for a while they looked at, well, maybe what we should do is, instead of the rezoning proposals we had done before, is just change some of the boundaries, including in North Amherst, to use an example, shrinking it down to in the way that it had been proposed under the village center zoning, and changing some of it to village center business, keeping some commercial, based on the distribution that had been discussed in the community design workshop, having Sunderland Road be more commercial, having other parts of it be more village center. The decision at the time was made was that it was simpler to simply change some of the regs and not change the boundaries, partly because the commercial district as it stands, in North Amherst at least, is well behind the frontage along Montague Road. There's not going to be any development, commercial development, on Montague Road under this. It happens in the commercial district, if it happens at all. So there's no change there. There's no impact on historic buildings. That's been raised as an issue. The only historic buildings that matter in North Amherst are along Montague Road. There's a couple of farmhouses in the commercial district that date from the 1890s. Everything earlier than that is on Montague Road, is not in this district, and would not be impacted by this. So there's just, we've talked before, in fact we had this conversation very early on, that to an extent the riverine environments, the floodplains and so forth protect themselves. There are a whole set of other regulations that have nothing to do with zoning that say, it doesn't matter what the zoning says, you can't do that there. And that happens all around, along Eastman Brook, it happens all along the Mill River, west of Sunderland Road. So there are existing protections that you don't see when you look at that map and you see that big red blob. That was part of the reason why the subcommittee went with, let's just change the rules here. There's existing protections in place, partly because of the limits of this district. We'll just change a few of the rules, particularly having to do with mixed uses, so that we encourage what is more of a village center, not a complete one, but more of a village center in this area than can exist now. And that was the whole intent.
That's right.
A very brief comment, Ms. Keller. I really genuinely believe that our process has been greatly improved by having you and other people so involved. I mean, I think it's helped us sharpen what our vision is, and to try to work as much with people in particular parts of town that are going to be affected by what we do. And I feel like, for me, this is kind of the end point. Like, we're kind of replaying or playing out what will probably be part of the conversation at town meeting. And there's a point where I just can't join you and agree with you. So after listening and learning and making a lot of adjustments, I think fundamentally, I just see this issue differently. Where you say eviscerate, I think improve. And so I think we're at an impasse that we won't have everybody's support as much as I would like your support for the zoning proposals. And I think we just have to live with that, and we will have the community conversation through our legislative body and through other forums that we're going to have leading up to town meeting. But I just have to say, I listen to you and I hear you, and you have a lot to add to this conversation, but at the end of the day, I support where we are with this, and I'm not inclined to change it.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Appreciate it.
Okay. Chris, did you want to say something about heights or something?
I just wanted to say something about the floor height, because we've heard from people on the retail end who say that they need a 12-foot ceiling height to have a decent retail space. And then you need 10 feet for the second story and the third story with utilities running between the floors. And then you need a roof. And the roof is above the third floor. So by the time you get to 40 feet, you're at the peak of the roof, or you're at the middle of the roof, depending on what we decide where you measure it. But 40 feet does not mean 4 floors. That was my only comment.
So more comfortably fit 3 floors now.
Even if you did 8-foot ceilings and absolutely minimum floors, still it says 3 stories or 3 floors is the maximum. So.
Okay. Sure.
I also came with a statement, and after listening to what you just said, I don't know if you're thinking, but I don't know if this is the appropriate time for the planning.
Will you be around for planning board? Because it's more useful if more people can hear it, I think.
Well, it's essentially saying a very similar thing that this folks. So,
We can hear it, or you can submit it to the planning board, and we can.
I'm perfectly happy to entertain your comments.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll do that now.
If you don't mind me chewing through
No, it's okay.
while listening.
That's fine. Elisa Rubenstein, Precinct 10. And I have been in a similar situation. I've been away since the end of December. I just came back the end of March. So I was looking at the mailings from the planning board and looking at this material for the first time. So I'm kind of coming late onto the bandwagon. But in looking over the proposals that were likely to come before town meeting in the spring, I really find myself in a quandary. As a resident that is living near the center of town, I have spoken against and voted against several zoning articles in recent years that sought to increase density and, in my mind, potentially destabilize existing family neighborhoods. And at that time, many of us said, why don't you focus on the downtown first? Why don't you focus on that and make that more dense? And there's already design controls there in place. That seemed like a good next step. And here I come back and I see it's there. And I was very excited to see that it was included. But then when I went through more of the packet, I really looked at principally North Amherst and felt that the changes just might have a potential impact still that would be destabilizing to that area. I felt that's still a vulnerable residential area, and I wouldn't feel good supporting it at this point. So it makes it extremely difficult for me because for once I really felt like I want to vote for a zoning bylaw. I want to really support it. and go into it and help talk it up. Like they're listening to us, and I can see great potential. There's a lot of wasted space downtown. There's a lot of areas that need to be addressed. But by putting all these things in one package, I don't know what I'm going to do about it. So my question was, and some of these things were answered tonight, but why should all these parts be put in this one package? What is the advantage? Will it simplify things at town meeting? Will it garner the most votes because having the least objections raised on the floor? I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I think I think it might assure a rezoning vote for North Amherst property owners or interests by linking it to areas in which town meeting doesn't really object to. So I just kind of felt that we would get more yes votes. I think that the BG, the Center X district, would pass easily. And so I don't know if it's going to be another scenario of too many things in one package and people are finding ways to pick it apart and nothing will be passed because it's a zoning bylaw. Or is there a chance that some of it can pass easily and maybe address some of these other issues at a different time? That's my feeling right now.
Okay, so I just answer briefly. I think you're referring, the one that you particularly like are the potential dimensional changes in BG, and that article is going to be designed to be divided, and
Okay.
it could vote on it separately. So, to answer that question.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better about that. Okay, thank you.
The one you like and go for it. Well, no, I didn't. I understood your.
Should I make other copies for the other planning board members?
I can make copies.
I have copies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I actually have like one.
For all of us.
Okay, unless there's any further comment, we will adjourn for 3 minutes.
Minutes, okay.